Greetings in the name of the Most High Yahuwah and his Son Yahusha, to the 12 tribes that are scattered abroad. I am Brother Hiram, and in this video I am going to answer the question, what is the Synchronized Sabbath? What is the Synchronized Sabbath? So let's go. The Synchronized Sabbath is the scriptural Sabbath, or Shabbat, that harmonizes with the new moons and synchronizes with the spring and fall festivals by heading them up on the 15th of their respective lunar months. This harmony and synchrony characterizes the original relationship that the Shabbat had with the new moons and festivals and is supported by multiple examples in the scriptures. This harmony and synchrony is only possible by resetting the count to the seventh-day Shabbat every renewal of the moon, or new moon. This harmony and synchrony was disrupted by the traditions of men in the early centuries of the Common Era and is currently being restored by the Most High in these latter days. So now we're going to look at some scriptures that show this harmony and synchrony, and we're going to see how that the scriptures concerning the burnt offerings and how they group together the Shabbatot, the new moons, and the appointed times. So, then Shlomo offered burnt offerings to Yahuwah on the altar of Yahuwah when he had built before the porch, even as the duty of every day required, offering according to the command of Mashah, for the Shabbatot and for the new moons and for the appointed times 3 times a year, the festival of Matzot and the festival of Shavuot and the festival of Sukkot. That's from 2 Chronicles chapter 8, verses 12 and 13. And we impose commands on ourselves to give from ourselves yearly 1/3 of a shekel for the service of the house of our Elohim, and for the showbread, and for the continual grain offering, and for the continual burnt offering of the Shabbatot and of the new moons, and for the appointed times, and for the Kodesh offerings, and for the sin offerings, to make atonement for Yisrael and all that work of the house of our Elohim. And that's from Nehemiah chapter 10, verses 32 and 33. And on the prince are the burnt offerings and the grain offerings and drink offerings at the festival, the new moons, the Shabbatot, and all the appointed times of the house of Yisrael. He is to prepare the sin offering and the grain offering and the burnt offering and the peace offerings to make atonement for the house of Yisrael. And that is from Yechezkel or Ezekiel chapter 45, verse 17. And so here we see that the special burnt offerings were to be given on these 3 occasions, and we see how they're grouped together. I just brought out 3 of them, but there's actually a half a dozen of them at least, where you see the Sabbaths, the Shabbatot, the new moons, and the appointed times grouped together like this, where the burnt offerings were to be offered at these times. So let's go into detail with these burnt offerings. The daily burnt offering consisted of 2 lambs, 1 in the morning, 1 in the evening. That's from Numbers chapter 28, verses 1 through 8. On the Shabbat, we have 2 lambs given in addition to the daily offerings. And so that's verses 9 and 10 of the same. We have for the new moons 2 young bulls, 1 ram, and 7 lambs. And that's from verses 11 through 15. The festival of Matzot, or unleavened bread. We have 2 young bulls, 1 ram, and 7 lambs for each of the 7 days, and that is verses 16 through 25. And Shavuot, festival of weeks, we have 2 young bulls, 1 ram, 7 lambs, verses 26 through 31. Now, for Yom Teruah, that is the festival of shoutings, festival of trumpets, we have 1 young bull, 1 ram, and 7 lambs. That's Numbers 29, verses 1 through 6. We have Yom HaKippurim, Day of Atonement, Day of Atonements. We have 1 young bull, 1 ram, and 7 lambs, verses 7 through 11. And then for Sukkot Day 1, 13 young bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs, verses 12 through 16. For Sukkot Day 2, 12 young bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs. And this is That's from verses 17 through 19. And for each day of Sukkot, the young bulls, the number of young bulls offered would diminish. And so it would, but the 2 rams, 14 lambs would stay the same. So when we get to day 7, it would be down to 7 young bulls, 2 rams, and 14 lambs. We get that from verses 32 through 34. Now, for the 8th day assembly, following the festival of Sukkot, we have 1 bull, 1 ram, and 7 lambs. That's from verses 35 through 38. So, back to the previous screen. My point in showing this is to show the importance of the new moons. If you notice, the offerings, the burnt offerings giving on the new moons, it is on the level of the burnt offerings given on the festival days. If you compare the new moons to Matzot, Shavuot, we have 2 young bulls, 1 ram, 7 lambs for each of those. So the new moon in ancient times was treated as like a mini festival day, a mini feast day. Whereas we see for the Shabbat that it was just 2 lambs extra given in addition to the daily offering. And so this is how important that the Most High views the new moons. So how the Shabbat harmonizes with the new moons. Thus said the Adon Yahuwah, the gate of the inner courtyard facing east is shut the 6 working days, but on the Shabbat it is open, and on the day of the new moon it is open. That's from Ezekiel chapter 46, verse 1. And the people of the land shall bow themselves at the entrance to this gate before Yahuwah on the Shabbatot and on the new moons. And that's from verse 3 of the same. Now, brothers and sisters, we see 3 different functions, or 2 different functions across 3 different types of days when it comes to the cycle, Yahuwah's cycle of worship throughout the year. And we see the 6 working days that the gate is shut. But on the Shabbat it's open, the day of the new moon it is opened. Now, because we are not used to the new moon and Shabbat harmonizing, that a lot of us have the idea that, well, the new moon can just hit any time during Shabbat week. It could hit right in the middle, it could hit at the beginning, at the end, it could just hit any time. Well, brothers and sisters, if that's the case, then it would no longer be 6 working days. It would be 5 working days. But here we see that the 6 working days is separated from the Shabbat and from the new moon. And so we see that it's going to be shut during the 6 working days, but it's going to be opened on the day of the new moon and the Shabbat. And we see why it's going to be open on the Shabbat, the new moon, because these are set apart days of worship. We see that this is when the people of the land are going to come and bow themselves. Now, furthermore, we see from Yeshayahu, Isaiah chapter 66, verse 23, and it shall be that from new moon to new moon and from Shabbat to Shabbat all flesh shall come to worship before me, declares Yahuwah. Now, the verses I've given you so far are future. They are pointing to the future kingdom, where that this is not going to be an option. This is what people shall do. All flesh shall come to worship before me, declares Yahuwah. These are going to be set apart days of worship. Now I'm going to show you a verse showing how that not only is it going to be, are they going to be set apart days of worship, but that they were from the beginning set apart days of worship. This is from the past. This is from biblical days. Hear this, you who are swallowing up the needy, to do away with the poor of the land, saying, when will the new moon pass, so that we sell grain, and the Shabbat, so that we trade our wheat, to make the ephah small and the shekel large, and to falsify the scales by deceit. So that's from Amos 8:5. We see how the greedy merchants, how they were grieved because they could not sell their wares and rip people off on the new moons and on the Shabbat. Why? Because our people did not do commerce on the new moon and on the Shabbat, but these were set apart days of worship, just like they're going to be in the kingdom age. And so, brothers and sisters, this is something that we're not used to, that we don't hear much about the new moon. People don't know much about the new moon and the importance of the new moon in biblical days, because we live in the age of apostasy. We live in the age of captivity. We live in the age where that the Most High has caused his Shabbathot, his Sabbaths, to be forgotten amongst his people. So they're being restored. The Shabbat, the Shabbathot are being restored. The new moons are being restored. And this is part of that process, brothers and sisters, you watching this video this day. So how the Shabbat synchronizes with the festivals. Three times a year, you are to celebrate a festival to me. Guard the festival of Matzot. 7 days you eat unleavened bread as I commanded you, at the time appointed in the month of Abib, for in it you came out of Mitzrayim. And do not appear before me empty-handed. In the festival of harvest, the first fruits of your labor which you have sown in the field, and the festival of ingathering at the outgoing of the year, when you have gathered in the fruit of your labor from the field. That's from Shabbat, Exodus chapter 23, verses 14 through 16. Now, as you notice, I wrote the Hebrew word for festival, which is chag, beside the word festival in that paragraph. And that's 2282 in the Hebrew Strongs, and 2287 for the first one, chagag, but it's all the same. So chag is what is used for that. So, although all the appointed times of the Most High in Leviticus 23 are called Moedim, only the three pilgrim festivals are called chag. And so the three that are mentioned here. So not everything is chag, only the three pilgrim festivals. It's important that we note that. Now, we're going to look at Sukkot, Festival of Tabernacles. Speak to the children of Israel, saying, on the 15th day of this 7th month is the festival of Sukkot for 7 days to Yahuwah. That's from Leviticus chapter 23, verse 34. And so we see festival, chag. And on the 15th day of the 7th month, you have a Kodesh gathering. You do no servile work, and you shall celebrate a festival, a chag, to Yahuwah 7 days. It's Numbers 29, verse 12. Perform the festival of Sukkot for 7 days. After the ingathering from your threshing floor and from your wine press. So that's Deuteronomy 16, verse 13. For 7 days you shall celebrate a festival, a chag, to Yahuwah your Elohim, in the place which Yahuwah chooses. That's Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 15, the first part of it. So as you notice that this festival, all 7 days of Sukkot, is the chag. Not the first day only, but all 7 days are chag. Now let's look at Chag Matzot, Festival of Unleavened Bread. On the 15th day of this month is the festival, the Chag of Matzot, to Yahuwah. 7 days you eat unleavened bread. That's Leviticus 23, verse 6. And you shall guard the Matzot, for on this same day I brought your divisions out of the land of Mitzrayim, and you shall guard this day throughout your generations an everlasting law. That is Exodus chapter 12, verse 17. And on the 15th day of this month is the festival, Chag. For 7 days unleavened bread is eaten. So as you notice that when it mentions 7 days, it does not say all 7 days is the Chag. It just says eat unleavened bread 7 days. But the first day, only the first day of unleavened bread is the Chag, whereas all 7 days of Sukkot is Chag. That being the case, let's look at this here by the red arrow. 7 days you eat unleavened bread. Okay, we saw that in the last 3 verses. And on the 7th day is a festival, Chag to Yahuwah. Exodus 13, verse 6. So, as we've determined, only the first day of Matzot is Chag, the festival. You eat unleavened bread 7 days, yes, but only the first day is the Chag, the festival. And so if only the first day of unleavened bread is the Chag, the festival to Yahuwah, then this seventh day here must be a different seventh day than the seventh day of the festival. This is not talking about day 7 of Matzot, festival of unleavened bread. This is talking about the seventh day Shabbat. And on the seventh day Shabbat, the seventh day is a festival, a Chag to Yahuwah. That's the seventh day that it's talking about, brothers and sisters. Now, we're going to look at the seventh day of Chag Matzot, festival of unleavened bread. Okay, we're gonna look at that seventh day. And on the first day is a Kodesh gathering, and on the seventh day you have a Kodesh gathering. No work at all is done on them, only that which is eaten by every being, that alone is prepared by you. Exodus 12:16. On the first day you have a Kodesh gathering, you do no servile work, and you shall bring an offering made by fire to Yahuwah for 7 days. And on the seventh day is a Kodesh gathering, you do no servile work. Leviticus chapter 23, verses 7 and 8. And on the first day is a Kodesh gathering, you do no servile work. And on the seventh day you have a Kodesh gathering, you do no servile work. That's from Numbers chapter 28, verses 18 and 25. Also compare that to, the 7 days that you eat unleavened bread. That's the note there. Okay, so in context, this is talking about the seventh day of unleavened bread. It's called a Kodesh gathering. It's consistently called a Kodesh gathering. So look at this. 6 days thou shalt eat unleavened bread, and on the seventh day shall be a solemn assembly to Yahuwah thy Elohim. You shall do no work therein. Deuteronomy 16:8. So why does it say 6 days and not 7 days? Well, brothers and sisters, sometimes it zeroes in on the Passover and the first day of unleavened bread, and it'll talk about how we are to eat unleavened bread on those days. We are not to have anything with leaven for the Passover meal, the night before, the evening before, and then the first day of unleavened bread. So the remaining 6 days, this is what this is talking about here. The remaining 6 days, thou shalt eat unleavened bread, and on the seventh day, you see how the seventh day is separate from the 6 days. The seventh day is separate from the 6 days. 6 days thou shalt eat unleavened bread. That's the remaining 6 days after Passover and the Chag, the 15th. And on the seventh day shall be a solemn assembly to Yahuwah thy Elohim. Thou shalt do no work therein. This is the only place where it says the seventh day shall be a solemn assembly. When it's clearly talking about the seventh day of the festival of unleavened bread, it says it's a Kodesh gathering. But here it says on the seventh day shall be a solemn assembly to Yahuwah thy Elohim, thou shalt do no work therein. So what seventh day is this talking about? Okay, so let's break down this solemn assembly, because I believe it'll give us a clue. Now, the solemn assembly in Hebrew, it's called the Atzeret. That is 61:16, Strong's Hebrew. Now let's look at some verses that contain that, because there's only 4 verses that contain this word in this particular form. There's only 4 verses. It's the one I just showed you, and I'm going to show you the other 3. 7 days you shall offer an offering made by fire unto Yahuwah. On the 8th day shall be a Kodesh convocation unto you, and you shall offer an offering made by fire unto Yahuwah. It is a solemn assembly, Atzeret, and you shall do no servile work therein. That's from Leviticus chapter 23, verse 36 of the King James. because I've been coming to you out of the Hallelujah Scriptures, but I'm going to show it to you out of the King James because it translates Atzeret better for these verses, I believe. Now, on the 8th day you shall have a solemn assembly, Atzeret. You shall do no servile work therein. So this is all talking about Sukkot now. This is Sukkot. That's Numbers chapter 29, verse 35. Also, day by day, from the first day unto the last day, he read in the book of the Torah of Elohim. And they kept a feast, Chag, 7 days. And on the 8th day was a solemn assembly, Atzeret, according unto the manner. That's from Nehemiah chapter 8, verse 18, out of the King James, once again. All right, so we see these are the four, the one I showed you with the red arrow, and then these 3 verses, these are the only times we see this word Atzeret in this form, and talking about a solemn assembly. So the solemn assembly was technically not a part of the festival of Sukkot. Festival of Sukkot is 7 days. It says that many times throughout the Hebrew scriptures. It is a 7-day festival. The 8th day closes it out, and it's a festival in and of itself. It closes it out, and not only does it close it out, brothers and sisters, but it hits on a 7th-day Sabbath. Praise Yahuwah. And, we'll talk more about that later. But it hits on a 7th-day Shabbat. It closes out the 7 days of the Chag, of the festival of Sukkot, and it is a solemn assembly. All right, now look at this. We're going to revisit now. We're going to revisit the first verse we saw that had the Atzeret in it. 6 days you shall eat unleavened bread. That's the remaining 6 days. And on the 7th day, that's separate from the 6 days. On the 7th day shall be a solemn assembly, Atzeret, to Yahuwah the Elohim. Thou shalt do no work therein. So once again, it's from Deuteronomy chapter 16, verse 8, out of the King James. And brothers and sisters, this 7th day is not talking about the 7th day of unleavened bread, because this is separate from the days you eat unleavened bread. The 7th day of unleavened bread, you eat unleavened bread. Here it says 6 days you eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day shall be a solemn assembly. This is a different 7th day than the 7th day of unleavened bread. So what other 7th day is there? The 7th day Shabbat, brothers and sisters. See, I showed you that the 7th day is the Chag. The 7th day is the Chag, 7th day Shabbat. And so the Chag at Abib 15, the day that we were delivered out of Mitzrayim, praise Yahuwah, the day that Yahuwah delivered our people out of Mitzrayim with a high hand and a mighty outstretched arm, praise Yahuwah. That day, that one day is called the Chag, praise Yahuwah, and the 7th day is the Chag, the 7th day Shabbat. So in like manner, and on the 7th day, separate from the 6 days here, shall be a solemn assembly. Likewise, this is the 7th day Shabbat. So, let's break this down, because that may be too big of a jump for some of you. And so I want to slow it down, and I want to break this down. Why the 7th day Shabbat and not the 7th day of the festival? Why not just do it traditionally? Every time you see 7th day, and it's talking about the festivals, let's just always say it's the 7th day of the festival and leave it at that. Leave it alone. Leave it alone. Well, this is why we're not going to leave it alone, brothers and sisters, because when you look at it in context, then you'll see that, no, it can't be talking about the 7th day of the festival. So let's check it out. 7 days you eat unleavened bread, and on the 7th day is a Chag to Yahuwah. Praise Yahuwah, like we just said. And I showed you over and over how it's only the first day that is called the Chag for matzot, for unleavened bread. It does not call all 7 days the Chag like it does for Sukkot. It zeroes in on Abib 15 and says the 7th day is a Chag. And so the only day that is called Chag is Abib 15. So the seventh day is Aviv 15th. That's the seventh day Shabbat. The only days in the Hebrew scriptures that are referred to as Chag are the three pilgrim festivals. We talked about that. For Sukkot, all 7 days are called Chag, whereas for Matzot, only the first day, Aviv 15, is called Chag. There is no second witness in the Hebrew scriptures for the seventh day of the festival being called Chag, whereas there are multiple witnesses of the first day, Aviv 15, being called Chag. Now let's look at this solemn assembly again. 6 days thou shalt eat unleavened bread. That's the remaining 6 days after the Pesach, first day of unleavened bread. And on the seventh day, separate from the 6 days now, and on the seventh day shall be a solemn assembly, Atzeret, to Yahuwah, thy Elohim. Thou shalt do no work therein. This seventh day is separate from the 6 days wherein unleavened bread is eaten. The only other day within the appointed times that is referred to as solemn assembly, Atzeret, is the 8th day that follows the festival of Sukkot. There is no second witness in the Hebrew scriptures to the 7th day of Matzot or unleavened bread being a solemn assembly, Atzeret. It is only called a Kodesh gathering. Praise Yahuwah. So showing that this solemn assembly, it functions like the solemn assembly of Sukkot. It closes out the festival, but it's not a part of the 7 days. So just like the 8th day solemn assembly is not a part of the 7-day festival of Sukkot, likewise, this solemn assembly, this 7th day Shabbat, is what this 7th day is talking about. This 7th day Shabbat, because we already know now that the 15th day is Shabbat, because the 7th day is the Chag, 7th day Shabbat. So the next 7th day would be the 22nd. That would be the 7th day, which is a solemn assembly, which would follow the 7 days we eat unleavened bread. So what difference does it make? Why does it even matter? Demonstrating that the 7th day Shabbat synchronizes with the first day of both major festivals helps us understand how to properly count to Shabbat. The only way for the 7th day Shabbat to synchronize with the first day of both major festivals is to reset the count every renewal of the moon, or new moon. This synchrony of the Shabbat and the festivals year by year is impossible with a perpetual 7-day count. In this lesson, I demonstrated through Torah that Aviv 15 will always synchronize with the 7th day Shabbat. I will now demonstrate how the scriptures give us examples of the 7th day Shabbat landing on the synchronized lunar dates for 2 months in a row. This proves that the 7th day Shabbat will land on the synchronized lunar dates not only in the first month of the year, but in every month of the year. 2 consecutive months of synchronized Shabbathot or Sabbaths, landing on the 8th, 15th, 22nd, and 29th. Example number 1. Consider that on top of the evidence that we have already set forth, proving that Aviv 15 will always synchronize with the 7th day Shabbat, the Shabbat is a memorial not just of creation, as we see from Exodus 20 verses 8 through 11, but also of the Exodus from Deuteronomy 5, 12 through 15. Shabbat memorials. Remember the Shabbat day to kadosh it. 6 days you labor and shall do all your work, but the 7th day is a Shabbat of Yahuwah your Elohim. You do not do any work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates. For in 6 days Yahuwah made the Shamayim and the earth, the sea, and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Therefore Yahweh barak the Shabbat day and kadosh it. Exodus chapter 20, verses 8 through 11. Guard the Shabbat day to kadosh it, as Yahweh your Elohim commanded you. 6 days you labor and shall do all your work, but the seventh day is a Shabbat of Yahweh your Elohim. You do not do any work, you, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your ox, nor your donkey, nor any of your cattle, nor your stranger who is within your gates, so that your male servant and your female servant rest as you do. And you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Mitzrayim, and that Yahweh your Elohim brought you out from there by a strong hand and by an outstretched arm. Therefore, Yahweh your Elohim commanded you to perform the Shabbat day. Praise Yahweh. And so, as I said before, the Shabbat is not just a memorial of creation, but a memorial of the Exodus. If we look at Deuteronomy 5 here, and if we see the last couple sentences, it says, and you shall remember two things. You shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Mitzrayim, and that Yahweh your Elohim brought you out from there by a strong hand and by an outstretched arm. Praise Yahuwah. And so this is not just about remembering that we were slaves, but remembering that he brought us out from there by a strong hand and by an outstretched arm. That's the Exodus there. That is what took place on Abib 15. This is part of the memorial of the seventh day Shabbat. It's not just creation. Praise Yahuwah. That the idea of this perpetual creation week Shabbat, it ignores the reality that the Shabbat is a memorial also of the Exodus, as we see plainly and clearly here in Deuteronomy chapter 5. All right. Now, as I said, memorial not just of creation, but also of the Exodus. And they departed from Elim, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai, on the 15th day of the second month after their going out of the land of Mitzrayim. That's out of Exodus chapter 16, verse 1. And it came to be that quails came up at evening and covered the camp, and in the morning the dew lay all around the camp. And the layer of dew went up, and see, on the surface of the wilderness was a small round substance as fine as frost on the ground. Verses 13 and 14. And it came to be on the 6th day that they gathered twice as much bread, 2 omers for each one, and all the rulers of the congregation came and told Mashah. And he said to them, this is what Yahweh has said, tomorrow is a rest, a Shabbat Kodesh to Yahweh. It's verses 22 and the first part of verse 23. Praise Yahweh. So, let's go back here. So they got there on the 15th. We see that the first day of manna was the morning afterwards. So the 16th would have been the first day of manna. And then the 6th day of the manna would have been on the 21st. And then when he said tomorrow is a rest, a Shabbat Kodesh to Yahuwah, the Shabbat fell on the 22nd. And so what we see here in Manna Week is that the Shabbats did fall on the synchronized lunar dates. And so they fell on the 15th and the 22nd here. Praise Yah. And so seeing that Abib 15 is always a 7th-day Shabbat, here we have 2 months in a row. This is the 2nd month in a row consecutively that we have the Shabbat falling on the synchronized dates. Now, example number 2. And this is about 40 years later. And the manna ceased at that time on the morrow of the Passover, and there was no more manna for the children of Israel, and they ate of the produce of the land of Canaan. That's Yashar or Jasher, as some of you may know it as, but Yashar 88:12. And that compare that to Joshua 5:10 through 12. And it was on the second month, on the first day of the month, that Yahuwah said to Yahushua, Rise up, behold, I have given Jericho into thy hand with all the people thereof, and all your fighting men shall go round the city once each day. Thus shall ye do for 6 days. That's Yashar chapter 88, verse 14. Compare that to Joshua chapter 6, verse 3. And let the 7 Kohanim bear 7 ram's horns before the ark, and on the 7th day go around the city 7 times, while the Kohanim blow the horns. It's from Joshua chapter 6, verse 4. Now, concerning the manna ceasing, remember now that Yahuwah would send 6 days of manna. He would send the manna on the 6 working days, 6 days of manna, and then it would cease. It would periodically cease on the Shabbat, and then it would pick back up on the first day of that next week under normal circumstances. So the morrow of the Passover, this is just another way of saying the morrow after the Passover. So that would be Aviv 15. So the manna ceased on Aviv 15. And it also says, and there was no more manna for the children of Israel. And they ate of the produce of the land of Canaan, meaning that after Aviv 15, then no more manna fell on Aviv 16. Because when the manna would cease periodically, under normal circumstances, it would pick right back up after the Shabbat. But it didn't do so here, and it ceased on Aviv 15, which is the Shabbat. So it ceased on Shabbat, praise Yahuwah. And so that would be Aviv 15. And so in the second month, and see, I cite Yashar not because I believe it's inerrant and infallible, but because it has good historical references. And so in the second month, see, it fills in the gaps that we don't get with the regular scriptures as far as historical references, just like this here, where it says the second month, the first day of the month. It tells us when the Jericho march started. So second month, first day of the month. So on the renewal of the moon, the new moon, this is when the Jericho march started, once each day for 6 days. And then on the 7th day, which would be the 7th day of the month, they went around the city 7 times. So doing it that way, brothers and sisters, there's no conflict with the Shabbat, because if you believe a perpetual recurring 7th day count to the Sabbath, you have a dilemma here. Here we have an offensive battle maneuver. They're not defending themselves. An offensive battle maneuver for 7 days. Which one of these days is your Sabbath? And before relying on the stock answer, the stock answer of, oh, well, Yah commanded it. Oh, because Yah commanded it, then it's okay. No. The question is, would Yah command something like this? That's a better question, rather than always the stock answer of, well, Yah said to do so. No, would Yah say to do so? When he told these same people to stay in your place on the Shabbat, do not go out of your place on Shabbat. And that is in Exodus chapter 16. And so here, this is an offensive battle maneuver. And see, I mentioned this in another one of the teachings too, is that think about the Maccabees. Think about how the Maccabees allowed themselves to be slaughtered on the Shabbat when the enemies came because they would not fight back on the Shabbat. And they decided afterwards that, hey, we're going to have to at least defend ourselves if the enemy attackers come on the Shabbat. So they allowed defensive fighting on the Shabbat. Now, think about this, because the Maccabees, they were tied into the priesthood, had thorough knowledge of the scriptures. If one of the days of the Jericho march offensive battle maneuver was the Shabbat, don't you think they would have drawn from that? Don't you think they would have said, hey, one of the days of the Jericho March. One of the days of the Jericho March was Shabbat. So, it's we're justified in fighting. We're justified in fighting on the Shabbat. No, they let themselves be slaughtered on Shabbat because they had no scriptural precedent for fighting on the Shabbat, including the Jericho March. They knew of the Jericho March, but they also knew that the Jericho March, not one of those days fell on Shabbat. Praise Yahuwah. Because the Shabbat actually landed on the 8th of that next month so that there would be no conflict. There was no conflict between the Jericho March and the 7th day Shabbat, the Shabbat of the second month. It fell on the synchronized dates, fell on the 8th, then, of course, the 15th, 22nd, and the 29th. So no conflict with the Jericho March. Here we have another 2 months in a row. We have the month that the manna ceased. Shabbat fell on Aviv 15, and then we have the Jericho March. Shabbat fell on the 8th, so that it would not conflict with the 7 days of the Jericho March. 2 examples of 2 consecutive months of synchronized Shabbathot, synchronized Sabbaths. All right, the synchronized Sabbaths of the 7th month. And on the last great day of the festival, Yahusha stood and cried out, "If anyone thirsts, let him come to me, and let him who believes in me drink." So that's John 7:37. And you see I have a note here for Hoshana Rabbah. Now, what is Hoshana Rabbah? Hoshana Rabbah equals the great salvation. That's the definition. That's the translation of Hoshana Rabbah, the great salvation. It's a Hebrew tradition wherein our people cried out to the Most High for salvation and also for rain for the crops. Each day of Sukkot, they conducted a libation ritual where the Kohen would fill up a vessel of water from the pool of Shiloah, followed by the worshipers who would do the same. For the first 6 days, they engaged in a procession where they brought the water back through the water gate to the temple, circled the altar once, then poured water upon it. On the 7th day, they circled the altar 7 times and poured water on it in remembrance of the Jericho March. Now, I mentioned the water gate. The water gate is actually mentioned in the scriptures. It's mentioned in Nehemiah, I think also in Ezra. Now, it doesn't mention Hoshana Rabbah in connection with the water gate in the scriptures, because Hoshana Rabbah is a tradition, but it is in there in the second temple. Now, it's not in there in the first, but it's in there in the second temple. The 7th day was called Hoshana Rabbah, 7th day of Sukkot, and was considered the grand finale in the greatest day of Sukkot. So it was filled with praise and great rejoicing as they chanted Yeshayahu, or Isaiah chapter 12, verse 3, where it says, "With joy you shall draw water out of the wells of salvation," and some of the Psalms. The 8th day was called Shemini Atzeret, and was called a solemn assembly. So there is no witness in Scripture whatsoever of the 8th day being called the greatest day, last great day. That is a tradition of men. There's a particular denomination that coined the 8th day the last great day. And so that's why you have tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people out there that believe the 8th day is the last great day, because of this denominational concept that has no roots in Scripture, no roots in history, whereas the last great day being the 7th day of the festival, the 7th day of Sukkot, is thoroughly scriptural, thoroughly historical. Historical in that I just showed you here, Hoshana Rabbah, this was the tradition that was being kept. For those who have a problem with tradition being mentioned and not scripture, understand what Yochanan, John, his purpose was in writing his writing there, the good news, that he was speaking to non-Hebrew people. He was speaking to people not familiar with the Hebrew customs. This is why he would mention a feast, and he would say a feast of the Yahudim. And this is why he included not just the scriptural festivals, but also the traditions. He talked about how Yahusha stood on the porch of Solomon, and this was during the Feast of Dedication. That's not a scriptural feast. That's tradition. But he still mentions it. Likewise, he mentions what's going on during Hoshana Rabbah here. This is why Yochanan said on the last day, that great day of the festival, because it was Hoshana Rabbah. He's recognizing the tradition that they were keeping. And then if we look at what Yahusha said about just coming unto him to drink, and that's very appropriate for what was going on there, because they had these water rituals taking place and they are crying out to Yah for salvation. And here Yahusha was saying that the salvation that you're crying out for is standing right here, right now. Hallelujah. So again, he said, if anyone thirsts, let him come to me, and let him who believes in me drink. Praise Yahuwah. And so very fitting for the occasion of Hoshana Rabbah, because of all the water that was involved in that ritual. And at dawn, this is the very next day afterwards, he came again into the Mikdash, and all the people were coming to him. And having sat down, he was teaching them. That's John chapter 8, verse 2. So if you follow through John chapter 8, he's having a long conversation with the Yahudim, and there's no break in time. And then if you go into chapter 9, you'll see likewise there's no break in time. This all took place on the same day. So they brought to the Pharisees the one who was once blind. Now it was a Shabbat when Yahusha made the clay and opened his eyes. He opened the eyes of the blind man on the very same day that he came into the Mikdash at dawn. This is John chapter 9, verses 13 and 14. All right, and so the idea behind this, brothers and sisters, is the last great day of the festival was the 21st day of the month, last day of Sukkot. So thoroughly backed up by Scripture and history, because Scripture says that Sukkot is a 7-day festival, not 8-day, a 7-day festival. Last great day, seventh-day festival, seventh day of the festival. Hoshana Rabbah, they did that on the 7th day of the festival. They did not do that on the 8th day solemn assembly. They did it on the 7th day of the festival. And then the very next day would have been the 22nd, which would have been Shabbat. And then here he heals a blind man, and it tells us that day was Shabbat. So again, we have the Sabbaths falling on the synchronized dates. We have the synchronized Shabbat here because the Shabbat fell on the 22nd. Of course, if it fell on the 22nd, then it had to fall on the 8th, the 15th, and the 29th as well. All right, summary. There is a real relationship that the seventh-day Shabbat has with the new moons and festivals that is evidenced in the Scriptures, yet has been hidden by the traditions of men. See, this is where the false doctrines have come in when people try to isolate the Sabbath. We look at different groups out there. Number one, we look at what our people did, the Hebrews. What our people did in the early centuries was that we took this threefold cord of worship, and the first thing we did was we snapped one of the cords. We took away the new moons. Praise Yahuwah. This is in the first 4 centuries now. This is in the first 4 centuries of the Common Era. We took away the new moons as a set-apart festival, and the new moon got diminished to merely tracking a day to track the festivals like that. Praise Yahuwah, but it wasn't set apart for worship like it was in Bible days. And so by diminishing the new moon, we took that anchor away, because that's the anchor for the festivals and the Shabbat. And eventually the festivals and the Shabbat were determined by a man-made calendar, the Hillel II calendar, a pre-calculated calendar. So the new moons were not even used for the festivals. at that point. So the anchor was taken away by men, by the traditions of men, by the leaven of the Pharisees. Yahusha said, beware of the leaven of the Pharisees. That's why the new moon was diminished during those centuries like that. Praise Yahuwah. But this was truly a threefold cord of worship, never to be broken. Praise Yahuwah, in the scriptures. And I laid that out for you during this lesson. Yet man has gotten in and he's got his grubby hands on it and perverted it into what we have today. And then we go even further. You look at, let's say, the Seventh-day Adventist denomination and how they isolate the Sabbath. They don't even deal with the festivals. Now, a lot of people that are Messianic Hebrew roots and Hebrew Israelite, we all deal with the festivals at least, but the Adventists, they don't even deal with the festivals. They don't deal with the new moons. They completely isolate the seventh-day Sabbath. Praise Yahuwah. And so we see the error. We see their error in isolating Sabbath only, disregarding the rest. We see the error of our people, the Hebrews, in the first 4 centuries by taking away the new moons and trying to just deal with the festivals and the Shabbat without properly dealing with the new moons. And so we see the traditions of men have jacked this thing up, and I'm showing you how it originally functioned in the scriptures and in Bible days. This relationship is characterized by the harmony of the Shabbat with the new moons and the synchrony of the Shabbat with the festivals. All three work together to form one system of worship with one mode of counting, which is by the luminaries. The seventh-day Chag in the festival of Matzot, unleavened bread, is both the first day of the festival and the seventh-day Shabbat. The seventh-day Atzeret in the festival of Matzot is the day that follows the last day of the festival, which is the seventh-day Shabbat. This day functions similarly to the Atzeret of the 8th day, which follows the festival of Sukkot. Now, I want to say this in the summary. I don't want to throw things off by talking about the 7th day of the festival when we're talking about matzot or unleavened bread. What I mean is the 7th day that we eat unleavened bread. Because technically, the festival, the Chag, is Aviv 15. It's not all 7 days. And so I say that just for familiarity, 7th day of the festival. But what I mean is the 7th day that we eat unleavened bread. Whereas the festival, the Chag, is technically 1 day when it comes to unleavened bread, that it is Aviv 15. So that is what I mean when I say 7th day of the festival. The 7th day we eat unleavened bread. And so once again, the Atzeret, only 4 times that word is used in that form in the scriptures, and it's always talking about a solemn assembly that follows the 7 days of a festival. The examples of 2 months in a row of synchronized Sabbaths, plus the example of Yahusha standing up and speaking at the festival of Sukkot, prove that the 7th day Shabbat synchronizes with the 7th month festival also. Praise Yahuwah. So it synchronizes with both major festivals, Matzot and Sukkot. The first day of each is always a 7th day Shabbat. Conclusion. The scriptures support a 7th day Shabbat that harmonizes with the new moons and synchronizes with the festivals. The scriptures do not support a 7th day Shabbat that cycles independently of the new moons and festivals. The current traditional mode of counting the Shabbat was given to us by the rabbis of the early centuries of the Common Era and not by Yahuwah. We are commanded to be set apart as Yahuwah is set apart and not to mix the Kodesh or set apart with the profane. The Kodesh appointed times of Yahuwah are all governed by the luminaries, no exceptions. They have nothing to do with the profane Roman 7-day planetary week designed specifically for the worship of false mighty ones and ultimately Hashatan himself. So, brothers and sisters, I know that's strong, but it's not wrong. So, I thank you. I thank you for just giving this a look and going all the way through this lesson. I'm going to break it down into chapters in the description box so you can, just for a quick reference, if there's certain portions of it that you need to go back over and check out, then please, by all means, do so just to get an understanding. And the main thing is pray. Pray for understanding. David, he prayed, Yahuwah, open my eyes that I may behold wondrous things out of your Torah. Praise Yahuwah. Pray that. Pray that. Daud also prayed, give me understanding that I may live and keep your word. Pray those prayers, brothers and sisters. These are prayers that I pray often. Praise Yah. That is why I have the understanding of the Shabbat that I have. It's not because I'm anything great. It's because Yahuwah has answered my prayers. So pray those prayers. Praise Yahuwah. Pray what our father David prayed, and that way you can get the revelation and understanding that our father David had. Praise Yah. He said that David said, I understand more than the ancients because I keep thy precepts, thy precepts. See, when you actually keep the commandments and the precepts, that'll give you even more understanding. Praise Yah. See, I can teach you about the synchronized Shabbat, but when you step into it and actually start keeping it, that's when understanding and revelation will really flow. Praise Yahuwah. So I encourage you to do so. If you have any questions, reach out to me either in the comments here or in my email, kodeshnation@gmail.com. That's kodeshnation, Qodesh nation @gmail.com. I'm going to go ahead and wind this down now. So with that, I will say, Shalom.